This is People and Their Poems, a podcast about the poems that make a difference in our world. In each episode, writer and educator Sandy Carlson talks with a person who has been influenced by poetry and become a poet or a supporter of this literary form. Stay tuned.
Welcome to People and Their Poems podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Carlson, and I'm here today with Julie Cook of Woodbury. Julie is a musician and a poet, a member of the Orenaug Chapter of the Connecticut Poetry Society, and a music teacher longstanding in our community. Welcome to People and Their Poems, Julie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for having me.
I'm really excited to talk with you about poetry as well as music and the relationship between the two and the connections that you make. And selfishly, this will give me and our listeners a sneak preview of what might be coming for us on April 29th at our Celebrating Poetry Day at the Woodbury Library. So can you just begin by describing yourself as a poet and as a musician?
As a poet, I guess I've always been the kind of person who notices a lot of things, little things, even as a child. So, and then I always liked to read, so that kind of naturally led to writing. And so I would write about little things that I notice, and I write to discover things about myself and about things around me. I find that a lot of times when I'm writing about one thing, it ends up to really be about something else. So I love that process of discovery that happens when you're writing poetry. That to me is so very exciting. And I also love the freedom that comes from writing poetry. I just feel like the whole wide world is open to me, and any way of writing is okay too. So that just feels wonderful. So it's just it's been a long time thing I've done as a child, and I've gone through periods when I haven't done very much of it, but then I'll come back to it. So it's always something I come back to.
That's neat. About how old were you when you first tried your hand at poetry?
Oh my gosh, I actually remember my very first poem. I think it was in second grade, John the Leprechaun. And I learned about rhyming words, and it was fascinating. So
who was your first audience when you picked up the pencil and wrote about John the Leprechaun?
Well, the teachers. I always loved to, get accolades from the teachers, but my parents, my family, really. And I was so lucky because the schools that I was in, this is in New Britain, in Connecticut, they always encouraged a lot of creative writing. So I did that in elementary school and in junior high school, and actually won a poetry contest in junior high school. So it was very encouraging, I was encouraged, which means a lot.
That's great. And thanks for that plug for creative writing in public education. I think that it really has a vital place as a part of our learning and discovery, and how to manage our freedom as well, not only to explore it, but to harness it for a purpose. So that's neat. You were a young girl when you tried poetry out. How old were you when you discovered that you were a musician?
Okay, that was young too, very young. My father was a musician. He played the accordion and the piano, and he made his living at first in the early years of my childhood, teaching and playing gigs. So he bought a piano for the house and for my sister and I to take lessons. I was 5 years old when I started taking lessons, and huge impression on me, that my dad played. I remember sitting next to him on the piano bench and him playing the wonderful standards, Cole Porter and George Gershwin and all of that. And I wasn't only entranced by the music, but the words. Not that he was singing, but once I could actually, hear people singing that music and look at the music in the fake book and read, I just loved the words. So that really played into the poetry too, the lyrics. And I took piano lessons and all through my whole childhood, and then studied further and started my own studio. So that marriage of words and music began very early, my love of book. In fact, when I was taking piano lessons, I had a wonderful piano teacher, Mrs. Olson. She taught us the traditional, classical stuff, but also my sister and I got to choose music that we really wanted to play. And a lot of times it was from musicals, which was really great because lots of the lyrics are wonderful there too.
Yeah, and the wordplay in musicals can be a lot of fun too,
Yeah.
and the pacing too in a musical. It must be very challenging to write lyrics for a musical, to move a story along and to be recognizable to an audience. There's a lot to consider.
Exactly. And the rhythms of music and the rhythms within poetry are, they have that in common. And also the musicality in poetry with the sounds of the words, it just appeals on so many levels.
Was there a particular poem or a particular song that opened your heart to this whole creative process?
Oh, that's such a good question. I had lots of favorites. There were some that really, I think some from West Side Story. What is that one? Oh, There's a Place for Us. That's a beautiful, beautiful song. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Lots of songs from West Side Story and Fiddler on the Roof. There's a couple of songs like Sunrise, Sunset. That's another one. I mean, even as a young child, I'm watching, this is going to show how old I am, but watching the Ed Sullivan Show on Sunday nights. And they would have people singing songs from Broadway shows that I didn't get to see that many Broadway shows, but I got to hear them. And, records my parents would buy or movies that were made of Broadway shows. So yeah, I was really deeply affected by these beautiful songs, deeply affected by them. And later I would go on to write songs of my own and put lyrics in them. And I've written two pieces for a chorus, a local choral group, Feminina Melodia, and put some of my own poetry in there. So it's just been a wonderful way to pair the two things that I love very, very dearly.
That's great. With the bad weather we had, I had the opportunity to be at home doing things, and I put WMNR on, and the DJ was playing basically the soundtrack from My Fair Lady with Julie Andrews. So as you're speaking, I'm just thinking about this whole narrative of transformation that takes place, but there's also the complex interplay of masculinity and femininity, wealth and poverty. There's so much going on there that is so rich. And I think musicals are incredible teaching tools, and those lyrics stay with us. When my daughter was little, it was Mary Poppins.
Oh, yeah.
And I can give you a Marxist, a feminist, any analysis you want. We watched it so many times. But on the first level, the level that she engaged it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was bright music, and it was music you could move to and mimic the dances. And it was a very social experience for us. Have you found being a part of, is it Feminina Melodia? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is that group about?
It's a women's a cappella chorus. We have about around 22 women. And we sing different kinds of pieces, not really classical pieces. I would say they're more folk songs from different countries, songs of peace, songs of unity, songs of freedom. And we give 2 concerts a year. And it's the director is Jan Gregory. And we actually have 2 longtime composers in the group, Julie Clark and Linda Goodman. And then I did write a couple pieces myself. So it's really talented group. Wonderful. Very exciting to sing with them.
That's great. Do they have any upcoming concerts or?
Yes, it's on May. I could tell you the date. It's in May. I think it's the 19th. It's May 21st, actually.
That's terrific. And you said it's been great to perform music that you've composed. What has been the effect of your poetry and your music on the people around you?
That's a good question. For a long time, I really didn't share my poetry very much. It felt so personal. It helped me to figure out what was going on within me, things that happened in my life, feelings that I had, making sense of the past, things like that, that I was very, very selective about sharing it, and only with very close family members. I wouldn't even consider trying to publish anything. So as time has gone on, I've become a little more sharing, and I would like to do more. Now I lost track of your question. Go ahead. What was it?
I was asking, how has your poetry and how has your music affected the people around you? And you were talking about moving from a very personal, private experience outward.
Yeah. So affecting the people around me, the times when I have shared it, I've been so glad that I have, because it has moved and enriched the people who've read my works, especially sharing it with family members. Somehow it's just really connected us in a deeper way. So anyway, that's been very satisfying, and it's given me the courage to go out to a little bit of a wider world.
I think with poetry, people do recognize, whether they do or don't write it or do or don't read it on a regular basis, that it is coming from the heart.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Patricia Lee Lewis, who's up in Massachusetts, and she runs writing workshops. And she talked about when you first produce a piece of writing, it's your baby.
Yeah.
And you don't need people to say your kid has funny looking ears. You want to hear how lovely your child is, because it's a product of your life.
Yeah.
And that needs to be honored first. You know, if the ears need to get corrected down the road, it's something else. but we need to honor that gift from the heart. And I'm glad John the Leprechaun had a good reception way back in the day, and that your poetry continues to. And having had the opportunity, the privilege of hearing and reading your poetry in our chapter of the Connecticut Poetry Society, I can attest to what you say about your attention to detail and the sound effects, whether you're writing about the sound of breakfast by yourself in the morning or a walk to the piano teacher's house and noticing the world around you. It's just very, very engaging and personal and universal in such a balanced way. And I think that's what we're looking for, is that human connection, but not that we're peeking in somebody's window, but we're on the road with somebody.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah. Yeah.
But you got to live life a little, right? I mean, there's a reason that we writers, we start young, and it's hours of practice and time and learning,
Right. And also what I'm finding too is going deeper it's a lifelong practice. I mean, and I could write a poem and leave it on the surface and say, wow, here you go, here's a great poem. But that's not taking advantage of the opportunity to really go deep and be sure that I'm writing about the heart of the matter. And that just makes it, I don't know, I just love that. That's the best part of the whole thing, I think. And it's hard. Sometimes it's really difficult.
What is your writing process like when you want to write a poem or something, you feel moved to write a poem? What does it look like for you from the time you write it to you decide that I'm done revising for now, I'm going to share this with somebody?
Well, in the beginning, and I've had to get comfortable with this because it's uncomfortable to simply just write and not, criticize at all. Just write whatever and let it be messy. And then go back to it and see if I can find some kind of shape and figure out what it's really about, which again could be different than what I really thought it was. And it's sort of a miraculous process that seems to happen each time. And I will sometimes lose faith that it's never going to happen because it just seems like a mess for such a long time. But you realize that is the process. And then I do really love it when it starts to take shape, and that becomes fun for me. I really love the editing part. I like that. And how do you know when to leave it alone? Sometimes I think I become obsessive with keep going back to it and going back to it and going back to it. But there's just a sense of knowing when enough is enough, for now. Yeah.
I hear you. I've developed this new habit where if it's like I've got some downtime and I just want to kind of see, I might just go goof around. It's a little bit like dusting a bookshelf that you've neglected for a while. That's not a very lofty description of revision, is it? But it is kind of that. What was I thinking of when I wrote this way back? And am I still there? Has it changed? Does this speak to me in a different way?
Yeah.
And it really is. And do you find if you choose a form, if you decide on a particular meter or structure, that the poem starts to talk back to you inside the shape of that new piece of writing?
Yes, it does. It does talk back. Yeah, it's interesting. And sometimes if I'm forcing it into a certain form, it really talks back. I don't like this. This isn't around. You know? Yeah.
There is magic to it. And, in my classroom, I have some magnetic poetry that was one of these sort of giveaways when I was at Bard College for a workshop. And so there might be 25 words on there, and kids will goof around with that and come up with new ways to say things with this really worn little square of words. And like the novelist Martin Suzak said, the words, right? And they have power. They really have their own life histories, and they're bringing that to whatever you're trying to do with them.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It really is. Yeah.
Julie, can you tell us a little bit more about your play shop that you have planned for April 29th at the library about music and poetry together?
Yeah, this has been a long time fascination with me. As I told you a little bit about that, but first I'll tell you about the play shop and then what kind of led up to this kind of work. What we'll be doing is I'll be bringing in lots of easy to play instruments for people. So we're talking like shakers and drums and things like that. And I'll have poems that are on cards. And what we'll do is we'll have people paired up, and someone will be reading a poem and another person will, or we may have small groups, will accompany the poem with music. And this is just a lot of fun. On one level, it's really lots of fun. On another level, it really makes both parties really listen to one another. There's a communication that starts to happen. The musicians really have to listen to those words, and the reader listens to the musical instruments so that it becomes a real collaboration. And it's a whole new art form, really. So I'm sure you've probably heard poets reading accompanied by music at one point or another. It's just beautiful. It can be gorgeous.
I had a recording of a story actually by Neil Gaiman at Carnegie Hall of all places. With an orchestra behind him, but that's a time-honored tradition, right? Demodocus playing the harp while Ulysses tells his story about his woes trying to get home to Penelope. Yeah. No, I think that sounds so exciting. And for me, with my tin ear, and I was always such a self-conscious kid, I had no musical sense, and don't even ask me to clap with the music. It's just not going to go well, So I can't wait for this. This will be a nice challenge, and I know in a very welcoming environment in the gallery. So that'll be terrific.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Julie, would you share one of your poems with us? I think that would be just a terrific way to kind of bring the conversation together.
Yeah. I brought the one that I wrote for my granddaughter. I won't say anymore. I'll just read it.
Okay.
It's called She Sleeps. The slender young woman on my sofa, one hand cradles her cheek, the other lies gently at her neck. Her long legs nest together like bird wings. Her face, surrounded by a splayed halo of flaxen hair, resides in perfect stillness, the visage of a dreamer traversing a universe of places, people, possibilities she may not recall in her waking state. Gazing in the half-light, I see her younger self rise up, turn to me with a mischievous grin, then race through the house, dark curls flying, laughter and joy spilling everywhere, as memories flood my brain and heart. The two of us on the porch swing, inventing silly songs and secret picnics under a blanket fort, and laughing till our sides ache from telling tall tales. She doesn't remember those details. In her race to adulthood, scenes have blurred and faded. Only a few clear images remain because growing up is hard, and sometimes we discard the best parts. So I keep them for her. This sleeping 2 decades old beauty, I hold these memories safe for her to find and remember.
What a beautiful gift to your granddaughter. That is stunning, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy.
And thank you for being a part of People and Their Poems podcast. It's been great to have you on.
It's been great to be here. Thanks so much.
This has been People and Their Poems, a podcast about the poems that make a difference in our world. Be sure to check the show notes for any special links relating to this episode. If you want to learn more about the podcast, visit peopleandtheirpoems.net. Or if you want to learn more about Sandy and her work, visit sandycarlson.net. Thanks for listening.